Hello, everyone. This is Philippa Benson, the managing editor of CABI Agriculture and Bioscience, CABI's open access multidisciplinary journal. Today, our webinar is about ORCID IDs. At the end of 2020, there are currently thousands of ORCID member organizations and over 9 million live accounts representing researchers across the planet who have registered and been assigned an ORCID ID. This presentation is specifically geared to those who have not yet registered themselves on ORCID and gotten an ID. I hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll be convinced that it's well worth the few minutes that it will take you to register and begin anchoring your career with having this individual tag. There are lots of other video presentations online and lots of other detailed information available about the benefits of getting an ORCID ID, but I'm going to try and put it in a nutshell for you here. Okay, let's start with the basics. What is ORCID? What does it stand for? Well, it stands for Open Researcher and Contributor ID. As an organization, ORCID is an open, independent, not-for-profit registry that's become the standard for author and contributor IDs across the research and academic publishing communities. You might see other ID systems out there or other kinds of IDs out there, but the ORCID ID is now well established as the industry standard. It was launched in 2012 and has become a critical part of the digital infrastructure needed for researchers to share information on a global scale. The system is in place and enables transparent and trustworthy connections between researchers, their work, and their affiliations by providing a unique identifier associated with them. As an identifier, an ORCID ID is a unique, persistent, 6-digit code created to identify one and only one author or contributor. It's a universal digital author identifier. It's freely usable and it's interoperable with many other publishing ID systems. So an ISBN number, for example, is a permanent identifier for an individual book. A DOI, or digital object identifier, is a permanent ID for a specific research article. Now, the model for ORCID IDs is based in part on digital object identifiers, DOIs, which are used by organizations to identify the specific publication that they might put out. Crossref is the organization that issues DOIs for articles, and they facilitate interlinking between millions of items from a variety of different content types, published content types, from journals, from books, from conferences and proceedings, working papers, technical reports, and now also to integrate with ORCID IDs. So why were ORCID IDs initially created? Well, they were created to track personal names of researchers simply because personal names change and they are not unique. Think about the thousands of people in some cases across the world with the same name, common names like John Brown, Andrew Winslow, Muhammad Ali, Xu Ping. A person's name can change over time through marriage, for example, or other life circumstances. There are also cultural differences in the ways that names are expressed. For example, in terms of the order of family name. In Chinese, for example, the family name is often put first and the individual's name second. Some are spelled out And there are also inconsistencies with different, in the use of abbreviations like junior or senior, or somebody the first or the second. Names are also expressed and documented in different writing systems that can be difficult to digitally capture. All these variations in characteristics of names can make it really difficult to track who is who in the published literature. ORCID IDs were also conceptualized and created thinking towards the future to support the transition of science as it had been printed in traditional journals to electronic science. It also allows researchers having an ID that is online and digital, provides researchers with a way to continually update their resume, their digital CV, so to speak. And it also helps to facilitate the linking of authors to all of their scholarly activities. And this includes things like preprints that they've uploaded into an institutional or other kind of preprint server, to funding they may have gotten, to data that they may have deposited, to the institutions that they may be affiliated with, or to a whole range of other scholarly activities. Linking an individual author to their specific research output has become increasingly difficult over the past decade, and in particular the past several years, and certainly over this past pandemic year. The number of publications in science, technology, and medicine have been growing at an extraordinary rate. This makes finding individual authors and linking them to specific publications and research output both more difficult and more important. In the increasingly complex world of scientific publishing and the competitive world of academic research, it is critical that every researcher gets credit in order to develop their career. Getting credit for your work is essential for your career development. And you want to make sure that you get credit for your work, and you don't want people to have to waste time trying to figure out who you are and what you did among the many other people who have your same name, who may be working certainly in academia and maybe in your own scholarly field. So let's say your name is James Lee and you publish under J. Lee, Dr. J. Lee. If someone was looking for you, they might have a hard time figuring out which J. Lee you were. A quick look at LinkedIn or Google Scholar finds thousands and thousands of people with Dr. J. Lee. Just today, I looked up J. Lee in LinkedIn and found over 19,000 entries. Looking at Google Scholar today and searching for the author J. Lee, I found over 500,000 articles that were published this year. As a researcher, you don't want to have people need to spend time figuring out, of all those different people and all those different publications, which ones were done by you. And who are the people who want to find you and be confident that the material that they find with your name on it is indeed yours? The people that find your work could include the readers, editors and publishers when they're considering submissions you may have put in, reviewers who may be looking at something that they've been asked to review of yours and want to go back and look at your other published literature. Certainly funders want to track what you are publishing and producing and doing with money that they have given you. Institutional leaders want to track to make sure that as a member of their organization, of their institution, that you are being productive. And certainly news outlets and the public want to know that you as a scientist are legitimate and trustworthy. And also professional societies are looking for speakers and organizers and leaders in their domains and may want to look at your publication record and output for those kinds of purposes. For all these possible audiences, ORCID IDs are helpful so people can disambiguate you from other individuals. At the same time, there are some other things going on that you need to bear in mind. While there's more and more research going on and more scientific output, there's also increasing concern about the quality and the reproducibility and the transparency of research being done. Funders, government funders, private funders, research organizations of all kinds are wanting to make sure that the money that they spent is being well spent on science that is sound and rigorous. In other webinars that I've done, I've spoken about the efforts that publishers are making to encourage authors to be very specific about the roles that they have played on research projects and in other efforts to ensure and commit to the integrity of the research that they do, the data that they're collecting, and the rigor of the analysis that they're conducting. Ethics in research and publishing are becoming increasingly important and also are being documented. And one of the ways that this documentation is taking place is by linking every publication to every author involved and making those individual authors take responsibility for their role in a particular piece of research. This is why an increasing number of publications are requiring that first and corresponding authors include their ORCID IDs on initial submissions. And there are now other organizations requiring that authors put in ORCID IDs when they are working with those organizations. For example, funder organizations. So in terms of career development, I want to emphasize again that an increasing number of publications are requiring authors to submit ORCID IDs, particularly if they are first or corresponding authors. And the movement is towards having all authors submit an ORCID ID linked to their authorship or contributorship to a paper or a piece of research. So it's not just an optional thing anymore. In all cases, it's required and increasingly required by journals, funders, and other organizations that support research activities. So together, Crossref and ORCID are helping to link individual researchers to individual scholarly publications. But since ORCID began in 2012, an increasing number of very specific digital identifiers are coming into play. So these include, for example, data site, where you deposit a data set and get a DOI or a digital identifier for a particular data set. Funders are having individual funding outputs linked through a persistent identifier. And institutions also have identifiers. So an individual piece of research may have multiple identifiers linked to it, and linking the individuals involved in that research back to their funding, their institutions, and their data. A positive part of the interfunctionality or the cross-functionality of all these different IDs is that authors can grant permission for their records to be updated as soon as new information can come in. So when an author publishes a new paper, that update can easily flow into all these connected systems and be linked to an author's individual record. So much of our lives is online these days, and we expect to be able to see things linked together accurately and completely. The short story is that your life as a researcher and the science that you produce is becoming fully digital and interlinked and interoperable and persistent over time. It's part of who you are as a researcher in the digital age. And having an ORCID ID is an essential core part of that. With that being said, ORCID is extremely mindful about privacy issues and does allow each person to define the use of the information that they put in linked to their record. And they can control it. That being said, ORCID is extremely mindful of privacy issue and allows users to define the use of personal information and how others can access it, what portion of it can be accessed, and how and when it's updated or corrected. Researcher privacy is extremely important to the organization. So users can set 3 levels of openness and privacy in terms of their ORCID records. They can make the records open to everyone. They can set it at a trusted level, which has limited access, or they can set it to be only themselves to see. Even though the record will be there, if the individual only wants it for their own use, that's the own use and access. That is something that can be set. I hope by now that I've convinced you that it's well worth your time to go and register for an ORCID ID if you've not already done so. Anyone who publishes these days needs to have a digital identity that can help them in getting success across their career. It's easy and fast to register, and you can learn how to do that by any number of videos that ORCID has produced. And I have one of them listed on this page, but there are many, many others as well. So the short story summary of the top benefits of having an ORCID ID is that the ID allows you to have a free, unique, persistent identifier that will be used throughout your career. The system provides you with tools for rapid and accurate linking between you and your research output, including publications, preprints, data, grants, awards, and other things that you may produce over the course of your career. It provides you with tools for rapid and accurate linking between you and your institutions. You may have multiple institutional affiliations. You may change institutional locations over time. ORCID will allow that to stay tracked. ORCID IDs will save you time and improve accuracy when filling out forms. And it will improve the ease with which others can find you and your work. Of critical importance, ORCID IDs enable you to more easily meet the increasing requirements of publishers, funders, institutions, and others. And it ensures that you'll stay connected as science becomes more digital and networked. Before I let you go, I want to encourage you to visit my organization, CABI, and visit our resources for information, publications, and additional education. CABI Agriculture and Bioscience, CABI's open access multidisciplinary journal, is published in collaboration with BMC, which is the open access branch of Springer Nature. We're led by an editorial board of top-ranking researchers from around the world. We're compliant with best practices in publishing for high-impact journals, and this includes using all kinds of digital identifiers. We're committed to publishing rigorously conducted science, and we publish across a broad range of primary and cross-disciplinary topics and accept research both that has broad global implications and also work that has more narrow and specific applications and implications. We're committed to fast, fair, and thorough peer review. And again, the journal is open access, and our content can be linked through both the BMC and the CABI websites. I also want to encourage you to visit our preprint server, AgriArchive, which is a free open access research for unpublished preprint materials across all the agricultural and biosciences. It's hosted and managed by CABI, and there's no fee for submitting. Materials are posted within 72 hours after a quick review for appropriateness just of content of the topic of the work, but the materials are not peer reviewed or edited or typeset before being posted online. They're posted just as you submit them. And you can also find our education and author services portal on the agriarchive.org website. Thank you so much for your attention today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write me at p.benson@cabi.org.